Hey YouTube, it's Forever Ed here with TEAMREAPER, and today I'm going to be bringing you an Ancient Warrior deck profile. I like to think of this as a mid-range deck, simply because it can do some board control in a sense. It does have a very hard matchup against control. In my testing, I have been able to break some of the weaker spiral boards and then OTK through that. But I've only taken this to 2 tournaments in which I played mostly combo and like one control deck. So, haven't given it a ton of testing, but I've been testing it online a lot. And this I feel is a very solid version of the deck, so let's just get right into it. So to start off, as you can see, we run our, 3 drone lockbirds. Kills Spiral, shuts down the first couple turns of Salamangreat, hurts other combo decks as well. So yeah. Next we have 3 copies of Ancient Warrior Sunmu, Masterful Sunmu, excuse me. So what he does is he's basically your searcher, and he's also a compulsory evacuation device. So basically, he's also he creates a soft lock also. So to explain his effects, basically, while you control another Ancient Warrior, your opponent can't target him for attacks. So if you have 2 on the board, they literally can't attack until they break the lock, if that's all the monsters you have. His second effect is you can send a card from your hand or field to the graveyard to search an Ancient Warrior monster, and there's no level restriction. You just can't search himself. And then his third effect is if another Ancient Warrior monster activates its effects, you can bounce an opponent's monster from the field to their hand. Yeah. Okay, next up is the other ultra rare, and that is Ancient Warriors Virtuous Luwan. I think I pronounced that right. Whoops. Let me get that in focus here. Okay. So this is what people are calling the best card in the deck. I disagree. I think it's a very good card, but it's not the best card. Okay, so what he does is he shares the continuous effect that your opponent can't target him for attacks. So same thing as Sunmu. If you have this in Sunmu, or 2 of these, or 2 Sunmus, your opponent has to break the lock before they can attack. Okay. His second effect, I should say, is if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can send a card from field or grave to special summon an Ancient Warrior from your deck, which is really good. And then his other effect is if another Ancient Warrior monster declares an attack, when an attack is declared involving another Ancient Warrior monster, so your opponent attacking them or them attacking you, your opponent, you can draw a card which will proc your other monster's effects. Okay. Next up is 3 copies of the big guy, Valiant Zhang Dai. So he's pretty good. He gains 300 attack for each monster your opponent controls during your turn only. If you control 2 or more, you special summon him, so he's basically like Great Shogun Xian in that aspect. And then if your opponent controls more monsters than you do, when you summon him, or actually at any point, he can declare up to 2 attacks on monsters during the battle phase. And he gets really big, so that's good. Next up is our Cyber Dragon of the deck, and that is Ancient Warriors Loyal Guanyan. So, as I mentioned, he's a Cyber Dragon. If only your opponent controls a monster, you can special summon him from your hand. We only play 2 because we don't want to brick with him. He also has a continuous effect that your opponent cannot target other Ancient Warrior monsters you control with card effects, so you can create another soft lock with 2 of them. That's why we run 2, to make all your stuff untargetable, which is really good. If your opponent controls more monsters than you do, you can destroy one monster your opponent controls, and it does target. So this is actually like the new Dino Wrestler Pankotops, except it's a 2500 beat stick that, you know, can be used late game too. Your opponent doesn't have to be overwhelming you with board presence in order to summon it. Next up is our most important searcher of the deck. So you might say Sun Mu is pretty important, but Graceful Zogong is actually very important. So what he does is you target a continuous spell or trap you control and send it to the graveyard. The targeting is the cost. So if they Veiler you, you don't have to send. Send it to the graveyard, and if you do, add an Ancient Warrior spell or trap from your deck to your hand. So that effect is very important, and I'll explain why when we get to the continuous spells. His other effect is when another Ancient Warrior monster's effect activates, he becomes an effect Veiler for any monster on the board, on your opponent's board. Last but not least is one copy of Eccentric Lu Jing, excuse me. So basically the same kind of thing. You send a continuous spell or trap to the grave. This one adds one with a different name from your grave to your hand, so it's just a little bit of recycle. And if you activate another Ancient Warrior monster's effect, he pops a spell or trap. So he's by far the weakest. He's just got a big butt, and he doesn't have a whole lot going for him, other than that he's level 4. So, next on to the spells. You got to run 3 copies of Fire Formation Tenki. All of the monsters that we run, besides Drone Lockbird, obviously, are Beast Warriors. So this is literally a free search once per turn, and it also can lead into even more searches by sending them off of Zogong or Sun Mu to get those additional searches as well. We don't really care about having an additional 100 attack points, so I do it all the time. Next up is 3 Fire Formation Tensu. This is the most important continuous spell to get your combos going. If you can keep from it, do not use this as material to activate your effects, because it's just that important. You want to have your double summon each turn. And yeah. Next up is the Ancient Warrior spells. We have 3 copies of Ancient Warrior Saga 3 Visits. This card's really good. So during the main phase, if you normal or special an Ancient Warrior, you can target it and then add an Ancient Warrior monster with a different name. Which, I mean, that's just a free search. You activate this and special summon the Cyber Dragon, and it procs. It's pretty good. Its other effect is that if it's sent from the spell and trap card zone to the graveyard, you can special summon an Ancient Warrior monster from your hand. And then this sends itself to the graveyard during the second standby phase after activation. That's not super relevant because we'll use it as fodder before that, but yeah. So the most important to ensure that you can OTK continuous spell is Ancient Warrior Saga Sun Lu Alliance. So what this does, I mean, the first effect's not super relevant. If you control Ancient Warrior monsters with 2 attributes, you can select an attribute and negate the effects of all monsters your opponent controls with that attribute, which is decent. If your opponent summons a monster or you activate an Ancient Warrior monster's effect, all Ancient Warrior monsters you control gain 300 attack for each Ancient Warrior that you control. That effect is what gives us the OTK in under, 4 or less summons, basically. I've OTK'd on 3 summons, I've OTK'd on 4, I've never had to push to the 5th. So Nibiru is no problem at all whatsoever for this deck. Okay. The last set of spells is some draw power. So we run 3 Pot of Extravagance. Obviously, if you're on a budget, this is not 100% necessary. You don't need the extra deck in order to win the game. So that's why I run it, and I have them, so why not? In a deck that doesn't need the extra deck. 2 Pot of Desires. Obviously, you could just run 3 Pot of Desires and Fill these slots with something else. It's just more draw. Like, you run 3 ofs of most of everything in this deck, so banishing 10 is not going to be a big deal. Last but not least, you got the 1 copy of Double or Nothing. I mean, this can come up outside of Utopia Double. If you're, like, playing in the Altergeist matchup and they can query you. I mean, I know that's a pretty niche situation, but Altergeist are starting to pick up in popularity. But other than that, you have the Utopia Double OTK. Last but not least, we do run some traps. We run 3 copies of Royal Decree. This deck struggles so hard against control that I decided that this was worth main decking. In matchups that you're not playing against control and you don't see any traps, this is still fodder for your monster effects. So either way, you either shut down your opponent's back row or you get just free fodder. You know, it's just more continuous spells and traps to send. And then last, we have 2 infinite impermanents. Obviously, you're going second deck. This is an OTK deck. You're going second. You want a way to stop your opponent as best you can. And 2 is all I had room for. I didn't want to run 41. Sorry. Okay, on to the extra deck. Now, this is completely up to personal preference. You could run a buttload of links. You could run a mixture of links Xyz. I opted for a an extra deck that reflects Super Poly in the side deck. I'm not going to show you a full side deck today, but that's just because side decks are up to your local meta or whatever event you're attempting to attend. You need to adjust your side deck for that event. But this is just kind of what I chose, what I threw together. Again, the extra deck is not very important. For this deck, you do not need this to win, but it's nice to have a solid toolbox to work with, so let's get into it. For the Xyz, we have 1 Brotherhood of the Fire Fist Tiger King. He instantly searches your Tensu. If you're able to... It searches you another Tensu or Tenki. If you happen to have a bunch of the continuous spells on the field, you can... and he dies, you can blow those up to special summon 2 of your level 4s out to the field, which is pretty neat. And his most important effect is that he's a AoE effect veiler, which is pretty good. Next up is Brotherhood of the Fire Fist Cardinal. This is... I've never summoned this. It's detach 2, target 2 fire formation cards in your graveyard, and 2 cards in your opponent's graveyard, shuffle those targets into the deck. So, if you really need to recycle, like, there you go, because this deck doesn't have really any recycle. I don't have a Digesto Emerald to run, but, you know, it's whatever. Like, sometimes you really tear through your continuous spells, so it's nice to have. Next up is 1 Light Dragon Ad Ignister. I mean, it's a protection effect. You don't really get to take advantage of the third effect when a Cyberse monster inflicts damage to revive one, but you can take advantage of the detach to pop one, because you'll only control 1 Ad Ignister. Next up is our going first package, is the Baguska, to lock our opponent out, and Abyss Dweller, because this is a Gravis-centric format. And then lastly, we have the Utopia package, Utopia Double, Utopia, and Utopia... Whoops, sorry. Let me redo that. Utopia Double, Utopia, and Utopia the Lightning. So all of those make up a pretty solid Xyz package. For our Super Poly targets, we have Starving Venom Fusion Dragon, Solomon Great Violet Chimera, World Chalice Guard Dragon Almarduke for the Spiral matchup, to break their link board. Earth Golem at Ignister for the Salamangreat and Spiral matchups as well. Predaplant, Triffy, as I call him, and last but not least, Brotherhood of the Firefist Swan, just as a nice option during the battle phase, or if by any chance you're playing against Lunalights, you can disrupt their plays. And last but not least, you have one copy of Pentastag in case your opponent tries to cower in defense mode against you. And then for this particular build, the only required card in the side deck is 3 copies of Super Polymerization. I couldn't find room for these in the main deck. This is just an example of a list that you could run. Again, you can run a bunch of links. You could focus more on the extra deck. But I find that if you can OTK your opponent without giving them the opportunity to Nibiru you and screw up your entire board, because that token would end up being very, very big, then why not just do that? But anyway, guys, this has been Forever Red with Team Reaper. I thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, and look forward to our next video. Until next time.